Well, good morning, everyone. It's 8:30. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 8th, 2021 Washington County Board of Commissioners work session. This is Chair Catherine Harrington, and with me this morning on the commission is Commissioner Pam Trees, Commissioner Nafisa Fai, Commissioner Jerry Willey, and Commissioner Roy Rogers. Welcome, everyone. The first item on our work session agenda today is board communication. Who would like to go first?
I can go.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Commissioner Trees, then Commissioner Willey.
Good morning. I'll go first because mine is really short. I don't have much to talk about. I will say that I'm working on my schedule to see if I can attend the Viewfinder tour in place of Chair Harrington. I'm working on that right now, and that's tomorrow. So that's.
Well, going.
Oh, you wanted me to join you. Got it.
We're all invited, and I didn't see it on your schedule.
I thought it was just me. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for making sure that I saw it.
No, we're all invited, and it's our first affordable housing bond project to be completed. Right. So
I'm going to try to make that. So thank you.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Trees. Commissioner Willey, go ahead.
Well, good morning, everybody. Let's see, last week was Fair Board meeting. We continue to have conversations about, of course, what the fair looks like coming up the last week in July. And it's now going to be extended to a 10-day fair, but it's we're still working on a lot of the details and trying to encourage all of our 4-H and FFA folks to certainly participate. We want to have a good blend of fair activities there, and so stay tuned. I'll have more information as that is firmed up a little bit. Also, of course, all of us had the site visit with Congresswoman Bonamici last week. That was good, and Chair, I know you'll give an update on that, so I'll just say it was good to see her, and certainly her interest in TV Highway. And then probably where I spent the most time last week was, of course, on rural broadband. Had several meetings with a variety of people. Joe Fresnel, who is the chair of the State Broadband Advisory Council, Daniel Holbrook from the Oregon Broadband Office, and others. We met and talked about kind of a state perspective, but also COLPAC and what we are moving ahead on with COLPAC. We have two proposals now, and we are looking at, there's a pretty significant difference between the two of them. So now we're trying to evaluate and make the choice here pretty soon. Also, Representative Neuron, who of course is the state rep for the kind of the Sherwood area, reaches up a little bit and catches part of South Hillsborough, and then extends on down to Wilsonville. She has been interested in this as well, and so brought her up to speed on what we have going with COLPAC, and we're probably going to need to increase the conversation scope that we're doing with other jurisdictions. Roy, part of it is the Sherwood Wilsonville area. I think that's down in your neck of the woods there. They're looking at certainly how they can enhance broadband down there. So, so this is certainly gaining momentum and speed. We just got to, I think from a COLPAC perspective, we're going to need to kind of stay at home and make sure that we take care of what it is that we were doing. But there's a number of other areas that are also doing exactly the same thing. So it's kind of exciting, lots of conversation, and certainly I'm learning a lot about technology and rural broadband. So stay tuned. Thanks.
Great. Who's next? Go ahead, Commissioner Fai.
I can go next. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Chair. My update will be quick and just highlight the TV Highway tour. It's a great event, and Thanks so much for all the elected officials who showed support and really brought really dangerous stories and lived experience from our residents in Washington County and people who use TV highway. So I really appreciated that event and appreciate the Congresswoman prioritizing TV highway and funneling some funds to us. And last week was also CPO 6 meeting. Thank you, Chair Harrington, for joining me. It was really a great way as members of the CPO emphasized multiple times. Great way to practice democracy and really ask tough questions and challenge all of us to be accessible. And so it was a really great, I told you, Chair Harrington, a couple months ago that they're going to have a lot of questions, and they certainly delivered, lived to that expectation. And thank you for answering and providing all that feedback.
Well, thank you for inviting me to join you. I always appreciate that. As you heard me say at the CPO meeting, I tend to leave the district level CPOs to the district commissioner. So it was nice of you to invite me to join you. And we had a good time.
Yeah, we'll make a habit of it and practice of it, and invite you a few times out of the year to come and join.
Great.
But this was a really perfect timing because of all the issues happening in Washington County, and of course the pandemic exacerbating every problem that ever existed. So thank you, and that's my update.
Thank you. Commissioner Rogers, anything?
I guess I go through a few things. One, another completely busy week, as well as next week. I really don't always tell you everything I'm doing, but we had the CWI meeting yesterday, Diane, where for those of you who don't really have a lot of background on that particular group, we were going to sell fertilizer. We thought that was going to happen, as you know, through contractual arrangements. There's not a lot of fertilizer to sell. So it's an organization that's kind of repositioning, repurposing itself, seeing where they might go from there. Last night was the ACT meeting. We had to say goodbye to our own Pam Trees. Pam, as you know, was the business representative, and she was leaving her position at WEA at the end of July, and our terms, what they come due July 1, just was a timing issue. So we said our goodbyes and thanked her for all of her good work. Kristen Leichner, I don't know how many of you know Kristen. She's a CEO, president, owner, all of the above of Pride Disposal, located out of Sherwood. But she was unanimously selected by the mayors to take on that new position, and I think she'll do well. Wednesday is that affordable housing. If you know where my office is, go down about 3 blocks, and that's where it is, 4 blocks. It'll be an interesting event at the Viewfinder. I'm going to see a Southwest Corridor Equity meeting sponsored by Metro, noon to 1 on Thursday. Friday, I actually can get some time off. Next Monday's WCCC. Then I have a homeless encampment briefing. Are we still doing the town hall on that night?
On the 28th.
Okay, yeah, it's still okay. I can release that. Don't forget King City, State of the City on the 16th. That's probably going out far enough. That's it. Oh, by the way, one interesting thing at the Suzanne Bonamici, kind of a little human interest story. I had this guy come up and he said, "Are you Roy Rogers?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I've wanted to meet you." I didn't know him. He was
You're the man named after the road, right?
No, he was more interested in the cowboy, but he lived in that district. He says, "I have a present for you." And I said, "Well, that's very kind. I don't know you, but thank you." All right. And so I went over to his car. He pulled out a Roy Rogers comic book, all in, encased in some kind of a covering, nice. And he said that he's a comic book collector. Always wanted to meet this Roy Rogers. I thanked him profusely. I thought it was very generous. I said, "You've never even met me." So we had a little bit of correspondence after that a few different times over the last week. And name is Ronnie, just a very nice man. His wife has a backdrop that she was in some kind of film business, I think TV Guide or something in California before they moved up here. So you never know who you're going to meet at one of these meetings. So that's my report.
Oh, that's great. That's great. It's a small world, right? Well, a few things. As Commissioner Fye mentioned, I joined her with CPO 6. In answering one question with regard to homelessness, I mentioned that we are having an upcoming meeting on a homeless encampment proposal and, a new proposal. And unfortunately, the person who had posed the question for which I was responding thought that I was saying that we were just for the first time putting together a response with regard to homelessness. So heads up, Mary, should you see anything coming up through the constituent communications. I want to make sure that you're all aware that the city of Beaverton has selected a new city manager. Jen Huriyama will be starting there later in the coming months. Friday afternoon, I was able to join a portion of the Juvenile Corrections Committee meeting. So some good information was shared there. Lynn and her team continue to do awesome work, gathering input from service providers, ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to contribute to the development of plans, as well as to help weigh in on various grant submissions for the benefit of our youth here in Washington County. On Friday morning, perhaps some of you also attended the joint AOC-NACO meeting on the ARPA funds. They will continue to advocate on revenue loss implementation. So I, with GR's help, had ensured to pose that that is problematic for us given the federal contributions of aid in 2020 with regard to coronavirus. Also Friday morning, along with Commissioner Willie, as liaison, the two of us, we participated in the internal ARPA steering committee meeting, working to develop proposals for the board's upcoming work session, July 22nd. So I'm looking forward to us discussing that. So in addition to our budget work, it continues to be a busy June. So, and in every public meeting I'm in, yesterday I was at the, I spoke at the Washington County Public Affairs Forum. And I really do enjoy the Q&A sessions. But every chance I get, I continue to advocate that folks get vaccinated. The startling statistics that were published in the last few days about the numbers of people who are getting sick, and almost all of them are folks who have not been vaccinated yet. So I just want everyone to get vaccinated now as quick as they can so that they can enjoy a fun summer. So onward ho we go together. Are there any questions? I want to make sure I don't forget to talk about the formal agenda. So I was just about to jump to that, but then I realized, wait a second, Catherine, leadership communications. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Ms. Angie, which includes the fact that we have 6 items that staff wanted to check in with us on. Take it away, Ms. Angie.
Good morning, Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. Clerk Moss, if you could promote Stephen Roberts as well as Aaron Doyle. And while they are being promoted, let me start with a vaccination update. So good news, Washington County is tied with Benton County at 70% vaccination rate. We're at 66.8% statewide. So what does this mean to get to 70%? There needs to be 106,671 more residents of the state of Oregon to get vaccinated. So please, let's get vaccinated so that we can reach that 70%. I do want to just lift up the work of our Health and Human Services team to helping ensure that vaccinations are deployed in Washington County so that we can reach the 70%. I'm very appreciative of their continued commitment. As a workforce, we have 1 positive case and 0 employees within quarantine status. I do want to just mention ARPA funds. What will be coming before the board will be a focus on protecting public health. Unfortunately, we still don't have clarity when or for sure how our public health dollars will be funneling from the state and the Fed. So we do need to ensure that we are continuing to protect public health so that we can stay on this positive trajectory, and hopefully we will have more flexibility upcoming in ARPA funds once we get the clarity of those state and federal dollars. I do also want to share, similar to our lack of clarity of where those dollars are coming from, we're starting to have, as a staff level, conversations with some of our special service district partners because they are supposed to be getting certain funding from the state, and that clarity is not known. So Diane, I don't want to take away your thunder, but just want to ensure that I'm lifting up. We are continuing to work within partnership with our key partners. Last week, I shared with the board that I'd be coming back with a leaf blower update. Our staff was just finalizing the information last night, and so I don't have a formal update this week. I guarantee it will be coming forward to the board next week, as well as ensuring that information is included in the packet for a transparency perspective. So with that, within your board packet, the letters have been posted to ensure the public has access to those letters, as well as there were several that were sent to you late last week. So apologize for I'll say the late breaking reading for the board. So let's start with the first letter. The board has received a request from the Oregon Geographic Names Board, which is a part of the Oregon Historical Society. Just as far as how that board is structured, that board is comprised of 25 members, and the board is appointed by the Oregon Historical Society Executive Director. So what is before the board is to seek input on naming proposals for 3 creeks. First creek is Albertson Creek, second Otto Creek, and third Fern Creek and South Fourth Creek. As the county does not have a formal naming policy, the suggestion in response is actually to say neutral on the naming proposals at this point in time. Staff are currently working from CAO office, Office of Equity and Inclusion, and LUT to bring forward a formal naming policy for consideration later this year. Chair?
On the letter in the 3rd paragraph, second sentence, it says the board has not adopted a policy, blah, 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 blah. Since the Oregon Geographic Names Board is also a board, I think it would serve us well to change that word to the commission.
Okay.
And then if I understand your overview email, I thought it was there, or that the state has the state and the feds each have guidelines for the naming. And I think it might be useful to, in that last paragraph that starts, since the area is indigenous, I think it would be useful to refer back to that state guidance, because if we're to construct or develop and then adopt a policy for Washington County, I'm expecting that it would need to follow that guidance as well from the state. So
I can make
those are all the
Thank you.
comments that I have on the letter. Otherwise, I'm thumbs up with it. Other commissioners?
Yeah, my comment is somewhat similar. I'm not certain who has really the authority. I understand that in the county, we have it on everything from our buildings to roads to parks to you name it, but on anything that has to do with rivers, anything that has to do with natural amenities, I'm not so certain that they don't have the authority to do that. And so I don't disagree. I just don't know whether or not, even if we adopted a policy, they'd have to agree to it, simply because they say, well, it's not necessarily navigable because they're too small, but they might have fish runs, they might have other sorts of issues. So before we go neutral, we might want to adopt that's why I like what the chair was saying in regard to referring to them, because they may have the trump card and we just simply say why are we getting involved in their issue? So beyond that, I don't have anything else.
Commissioners, any other questions or comments, or are you thumbs up? Okie dokie.
And in Commissioner Rogers, in response to, staff have been talking about revisiting the naming policy over this last year. And this example of the county providing input on naming to another entity is something that will help inform how we move forward also with our guidelines, because right now, just as we don't have a naming policy, we don't have guidelines as far as what input do we provide to others when asked. All right, let's move on to the next item. Erin Doyle.
Good morning, commissioners. This letter on I-205 would be sent to our Oregon delegation with a number of other logos attached. This is not a signature letter, it's a logo letter, just in support of trying to find direct funding for the I-205 Abernathy Bridge project. Just want to make one quick note about the letter. There is the possibility of a small tweak in the sentence related to removing the need to toll the bridge. That's to clarify that we're talking about just the bridge portion. This isn't in lieu of tolling altogether within the region. So basically looking here for a thumbs up to make sure that adding our logo, which I think fits within your adopted principles, works for all of you. I'm seeing thumbs up. Any questions or concerns?
Nope, looks like we're okay. Terrific.
Excellent. Thank you, board.
And now for the next topic, which there are 3 different letters in all.
Good morning, commissioners. Stephen Roberts, Land Use and Transportation Director. So what we have for you here are 3 what are called requests for interest. These are sort of preliminary grant applications, if you will, sort of putting forward some concepts for grant applications that would assist us with the implementation of House Bill 2001, the Middle Housing Bill. These are all three fairly straightforward concepts. We're looking for one that would just give us some consultant support to help with additional work that could be done as a second phase after we adopt an ordinance that sort of achieves our minimum compliance. There may be other issues that the board would like to have us work on. So pending board direction, the consultant could help us with that, some of that additional work. We have a second one that would just assist us with really building public awareness and developing some materials to help support and encourage middle housing development. And then we have a third one that's really geared toward outreach as we're working through our initial adoption phase. We'd like to get some additional support to just help ensure that we're doing good, equitable outreach, and some consultant assistance could help us with that. This is a fairly quick turnaround on getting these proposals out, so we appreciate your consideration. And then we'll be back in front of you in just a couple of weeks with the actual grant applications, asking for your support to endorse those so that they can be submitted toward the end of this month. I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Quick question for you. I realize that these have been submitted. Is it clear through the nature of the applications for a reader at the department that can any of these be funded, or is one a key linchpin and without that one, the other two make no sense?
Yeah, these all really sort of stand on their own. I really like the public outreach one. I think would be fantastic. And I think the implementation strategies would be great. And then those future potential changes would also be a good addition, but these really do can't stand on their own.
Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments, or are you thumbs up? Yep, we're all set.
Great, thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Angie, back to you. Anything else?
Just as a matter of information, moving forward, when there are letter requests, the letters will be posted to the board packet. Right now, they can be accessible, from the public under the board and leadership communication. So this will be the process moving forward, as well as we will try to, through Clerk Moz, provide a summary on Mondays if there is multiple letters that are needed for input from the board. And that concludes my update.
All righty. How about you, Mr. Rapplier? What's happening in our legal land that we can talk about in public?
Not much we can talk about in public, but we do had 2 days of interviews just last week, and we have 3 successful candidates. I'll be talking to them later today. That's it for today. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Alan. Ms. Taniguchi Dennis, Clean Water Services. Hello.
Hi, Chair. Thank you. Good morning, Board of Clean Water Services. My internet connection has failed, so I'm on my iPhone right now connecting into the meeting. You know,
works.
I know having all this flexible technology is really amazing. But Mark Jockers is also here to pitch in. I wanted to say that we've had some great success. We have no new COVID cases and no new exposures, so we're fully operational, and the team is in the full swing of operations. So I don't think we have any other announcements to make this week. So thank you, Chair. And thank you, Board.
Quick question, and this isn't urgent for now, but will having the statewide protocols lifted for the fall make it easier for your team to schedule the Tree for All plantings with Friends of Trees and others?
Yes, we're really looking forward to this change. I'm hoping that comes at the end of the month, and we'll be able to more fully engage and get back to working with our great community. So yeah, we're all looking forward to it. The team's working on the different protocols to shift internally. We still need to be protective of those folks that are worried because they're not vaccinated. So we're working on internal protocols to make sure we meet their needs, even though the governor has opened everything up. So yes, we're looking forward to some relief here. So Thank you, Chair, for asking.
Great, great. Anything last minute, commissioners, before we move on to checking in on the formal agenda?
I have,
Go ahead, Commissioner Fye.
I wasn't sure if Diane was done. I have a childcare issue today, so I'm gonna be off of camera, but I'm listening fully engaged. I just don't wanna, kids appearing on YouTube.
No problem. And Commissioner Treese, I love seeing your coworker. That's great. All righty, there is no formal agenda today. Why am I worried about checking in on it? Silly me. It's because 9 times out of 10, I forget. So I've been trying to redouble my efforts. Now we see where that gets me, huh? All righty then, we'll move on to the next item on our work session agenda, and that's the Washington County Supportive Housing Services Implementation Readiness Update. And welcome to our really great Supportive Housing Services team. Mr. Kalavar, welcome back.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Harrington. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Komi Calavo, Housing Director. It is a pleasure indeed to be with you this morning to bring you an update on the vast and dynamic work that is underway to prepare our department for implementation of the Supportive Housing Services Program. As you know, the Local Implementation Plan, LIP, has now been fully approved by you, our Board of County Commissioners, the Metro Oversight Committee, and the Metro Council. The plan was unanimously approved. And as staff, we are already building out aspects of the program according to the commitments in the LIP. We thank you for your support and your guidance along the way. Today, we have 3 components to our presentation and elements of implementation readiness to discuss with you. First one, a review of our first procurement process and the results. This is the RFPQ, the request for programmatic qualifications that was issued last month. The second, an update of our intergovernmental agreement development with Metro in partnership with Clackamas County and also Multnomah County. And the third and final part will be an update on annual revenue projection for the Supportive Housing Services Program. So those are the 3 elements you'll be hearing from our big team. So at this time, I will turn it over for the presentation to go forward with Jess Larson, Ty Schoferman, Jacqueline, which is our county CFO, and finally, Josh Kreitz, the Assistant Director. So go ahead, Jess.
She should be joining in just a minute, Comey, for you.
Okay.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you, Comey, for that introduction. For the record, my name is Jess Larson. I am the Supportive Housing Services Program Manager and will be kicking off this presentation for you all this morning. Great pleasure to be with you with these exciting new updates. Next slide, please. So for our implementation readiness overview, update of the Supportive Housing Services programmatic work underway, today we'll present for you a quick high-level overview of that work. We'll go deep into a couple components for you. First, the request for programmatic qualifications, or the RFPQ, our first procurement process, and its outcome has just completed. Ty Schrefferman is here to give that presentation. He is our Supportive Housing Services Community Engagement Coordinator. Next, I will give you an update on the Intergovernmental Agreement negotiations with Metro. And then finally, we have Jack Ling here, our CFO, joining us today to give an update on some the revenue projections work and work he's been doing with the CFO teams from the 3 counties and Metro. Next slide, please. Oh, and then Josh Kreitz is also here, our Assistant Director, and he will wrap it up and kick it off to you for discussion. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is that quick high-level overview I mentioned. You see right there in the center is July, the beginning of the fiscal year. That is the deadline so much of this work has been working towards, but it's really just one of the milestones, many, many milestones in this work. So I'll kind of go real briefly month by month, so you have sort of just a little bit of grounding and oops, next slide please, or previous slide please. A little bit of grounding in where we are and what is to come. So you are very well steeped in all of the work of the local implementation plan, which concluded in April, and as Comey mentioned in his remarks, has been fully and unanimously approved at every step of the way. May was really grounded in all of the RFPQ work. You're going to hear all about that from Ty in just a moment. Now, here we are in June. We're getting ready to operationalize essentially the outcomes of that procurement process, preparing for contracts with service providers, working on that IGA, of course, with Metro, modernizing Community Connect and other components of the system. And then in July, the work is anticipated to begin. Those contracts will be executed with some of our first service providers. We have bridge shelters that are expected to open. And that long-term rent assistance tool, one of the most critical components of this new SHS program, will also be available for people seeking housing. In August and September, we will be building out the technical support and training and all things needed for all the new case managers that are coming on board because of those contracts that will be executed with our new service provider network. So lots of training, capacity building, technical assistance with all of those providers and those additional boots on the ground, doing the work of getting people housed. That is sort of the theme of late summer. We'll also be actively recruiting landlords and working to begin the work of getting people housed. And then in October, you will get to look forward to the first quarterly report of this program's implementation, and that will just begin, sort of that pattern of quarterly reports that will be continued throughout the program's implementation. So just a high level view of where we are right now and what is to come in our very near future. Next slide, please. So to kick off the first component of our presentation today, I wanted to sort of ground you in the why of a procurement process, the RFPQ, we affectionately call it. As you know, in the supportive housing services measure, to do this work, there are really kind of two main components of the program. One is the long-term rent assistance tool. That's the mechanism that ensures the rent is truly affordable for the extremely low income households we are working to house. It is based on the Section 8 or the Housing Choice Voucher program that our housing authority already runs, and will be really like deepening the availability of that critical resource to create stable and permanent housing options for people who are currently homeless. That's one significant component. And frankly, that mostly gets done in-house with our existing and expanded capacity, building on that expertise and role the Department of Housing Services and specifically the Housing Authority already holds in our community. But the other significant component of this work is those boots on the ground, the people who are delivering the care to our community, the outreach workers, the housing navigators, the retention specialists, the peer support specialists, the behavioral health community-based workers, the benefit advocates, the list goes on and on. And all of that work is not done by staff in our department. It is done through our community-based organizations who will provide those services. So that was the nature of creating this procurement process, to establish a network of service providers that will together be working with us in partnership and creating that sort of expansive, broad array of services to meet our goals for the supportive housing services program. So this is a quick list right here of the 5 components for which the applicants of our procurement process submitted proposals for: outreach and engagement services, shelter and transitional housing operations, the case management and housing navigation work, supportive housing on site, all of those supports in affordable housing buildings or on site where people are living, and then all those community-based wraparound supports that go the extra mile to create stability. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Ty to take you deep into the work of the request for programmatic qualifications.
Ty, are you with us?
You may be on mute, Ty.
So Jess, I would recommend you go ahead and we'll try to work to get Ty on.
That's great. Thank you for that, Clerk Moss. Next slide, please. Okay, so the request for programmatic qualifications, as I mentioned, the purpose is to establish a list of qualified service providers who will work in partnership with the county and specifically Department of Housing Services. It was created, it was built upon commitments to establish a transparent, inclusive, and accessible procurement process. And all of those values meant operationalized in a procurement process. We, and specifically Ty Schwefferman, our Supportive Housing Services Community Engagement Coordinator, facilitated significant engagement work to work directly with community-based organizations, both those who currently provide these services in Washington County and organizations who would like to provide these services in Washington County, and especially focusing on engaging culturally specific organizations to ensure that we were building out not just a provider network, but a provider network that could provide culturally responsive and culturally specific service providers to our community. So that engagement work informed the actual design of our supportive housing services program. I saw some shifting around of pictures, but I don't think he's here yet. So I will continue with the rest of the slide. That note at the bottom that's in italics comes directly from our local implementation plan. And we thought this was a moment to just demonstrate how our implementation of this program is already being based specifically from the guidance and direction and the framework of our local implementation plan. So in alignment with the values of the SHS program and strategies for advancing racial equity, Washington County will center equity, transparency, and community engagement as a core principle of our procurement and contracting practices as we build a homelessness and supportive housing service system of care. So here you are. We are operationalizing those intentions from our framework document. Next slide, please. So the RFPQ procurement process began on April 19th. As a result of those engagement sessions in March, the application was drafted and then released in April. And then we gave providers a full month to consider the application and prepare their work. We also, of course, hosted pre-proposal informational sessions where we made sure that partners, that providers had ready access to any additional information or clarification of questions that they found as they perused the application draft on our Procure Now website. And keeping with that intention to be accessible, to be a sort of a screening in process, bringing on board interested, mission-aligned organizations who want to partner in this work, we structured the application as purely narrative. So there were 4 sections that each proposer needed to respond to, and those sections included the organization, an overview of the organization and their current capacity, how they do their work and approach, how their work is, how they approach equity in their work, their current service delivery approaches. And then of those 5 components I reviewed with you earlier, they described their proposals or intentions and how they would want to expand their services or deliver their services in alignment with the Supportive Housing Services Program. So they had a potential score of 100 from those 4 sections, and the passing threshold was 70 points. So we just wanted to make sure that there was a line for readiness and intention and alignment with the program, and all of the work of additional technical support, capacity building, training could come next after organizations were qualified as eligible providers. Next slide, please. And I don't see Ty still, so I'm so sorry. Really, this is his work, and I was eager for him to present it all for you today. So this is the list. Here are 38 wonderful organizations of the 46 that applied. So first of all, we are just so thrilled that so many organizations expressed interest in this work. It is a significant expansion of current partners doing this work throughout Washington County. So bringing on new and culturally specific organizations and bringing on organizations who are expanding their work into Washington County. It also, this list represents a wide variety. Wonderful. Ty says he's just joining, I think. So Ty, come on screen and I will pause and let you take over. Hi, welcome Ty. I turn it over to you to present this really illustrious list of our services network.
County Commissioners, for the record, my name's Ty Schwafferman, Program Coordinator with SHS Services. I'm so excited to be here today. Sorry I missed the first portion of the presentation, but I'll just pick up where Jess left off. So I think we're describing right now the 38 service providers that were qualified by our process. We're all very excited. Yes, thank you, Chair, for clapping. I just wanted to highlight a couple important things about this list that you see in front of you. One is that all of these organizations are dedicated to culturally responsive services. All of them demonstrated a commitment to providing services in a meaningful way in response to the diverse community needs of their community. 7 of which are culturally specific organizations, meaning they have demonstrated that their organizations have the capacity in their mission, their staffing, and their knowledge of specific communities that are experiencing racism in the region. And it's important to highlight this because, you know, as part of our process, we went into a lot of depth to both recruit and engage these community organizations in our process, from our feedback sessions, from the feedback on the RFPQ specifically, and also we recruited diverse reviewers. That was another element of this process that I think was very important to help identify the right organizations for this job. So our reviewers themselves represent Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian specific and Pacific Islander communities. And you know, some of them were our county employees, some of our experts in our community and within our staff, from the SHS team, the Housing and Human Services team, and the Office of Equity and Inclusion and Community Engagement team. In addition to that, we had a number of diverse reviewers from outside of the county who are community partners that represent geographic equity and racial equity and lived experiences, and have a considerable amount of knowledge and expertise in the field. And so we want to continue to recruit diverse reviewers in all of our processes moving forward, and I think that's going to be one of our commitments here. I do also want to thank Susie Fulcher and the Procurement Department, Kitty Kong also, that helped us and just trained all of our reviewers to go over the scoring rubrics and use the Washington County's method for procurement. They were a valuable partner in this whole process and making sure that we are scoring every single organization on their merits and what they presented to us in their qualifying application. I think we can go to the next slide. All right.
Thank you, Ty. And I want to thank you because it was really a Herculean effort. In fact, there were over 500 pages of application material turned in by these organizations that Ty ushered the evaluation process about with a very diverse and dynamic group of partners, the evaluators team. So a shout out to them as well. But thank you, Ty, for your excellent work in leading this process. So now that we have a starting network for our service provision of the supportive housing services program, the question is what comes next? So to be clear, this process does not award any of those 38 organizations a contract. It creates an eligibility status for them for the next 3 years, in fact, so that they are available for work, for the contracting opportunities. And so that is the very next step, our allocation of contracts and allocating those contracts according to the various service types that are needed to build out our service system and the services provided by the various organizations who've joined our provider network. So we will begin that allocation process immediately and get ready to execute it for the beginning of July, including those housing case management services, those wraparound supports and peer support specialists, the housing stabilization services, and winter shelter, for example. We also, as I mentioned in the overview, will then immediately begin training of those partners and case managers, ensuring that level of standard of care around cultural responsive work, housing first and trauma-informed care, and the list goes on, in fact. And then also that technical support around data management, contract management, utilizing the new modernized Community Connect system, data entry in our HMIS, our our homeless management information system, et cetera. And then, of course, it's important to stress that we have further support into some of these organizations ahead, which is the capacity building grants of foundational expectation and commitment of our local implementation plan, that we're both providing technical assistance, but also financial assistance to get organizations ready for the work, to build their internal capacity to do this work. So this is the work immediately in the next summer months ahead, but program expansion, and new contracts will continue on throughout the first program year as we build out this new system of care. Okay, next slide. So kind of a hard pivot, if you will, now onto the Intergovernmental Agreement discussions. This, as you know, is the mechanism that will make all of the work we've just been discussing possible. It provides the funding and accountability agreement or structures in our relationship with Metro. So just today, I'm going to bring you a quick status update of this work. Metro, their legal counsel presented to our legal counsel the first draft of an intergovernmental agreement in mid-April, and that began the conversations between our staff and their staff, and in full partnership with the staff from the other two counties, Multnomah County and Clackamas County. So Washington County staff, Multnomah County staff, and Clackamas County staff have all agreed to work on the negotiations of this intergovernmental agreement in partnership, so that there is one sort of one consistent IGA that each of the counties will ultimately sign. Those discussions got underway right away, and we have 3 different working staff groups. We have a programmatic staff leadership group working through the terms to make sure that they align, support, protect, represent the needs of the programmatic work. Similarly, a financial staff leadership group. You'll hear more from Jack Lang, who's helping lead up that work for us and representing Washington County alongside with his counterparts at Clackamas and Multnomah County and also at Metro. And then, of course, the county council staff working in partnership with the Office of Metro Attorney at Metro. And all of these teams are, for us, that is Paul Hathaway sitting in that work representing Washington County. And all of these teams are generally meeting weekly or emailing and progressing the work along weekly. And then we all come together once a week to keep the work on track. So big work underway right now to bring that first draft into a workable draft that the counties will all be able to agree with and move forward in the negotiations with Metro. Next slide, please. So as you know, an intergovernmental agreement defines the roles of the parties. So this draft defines Metro's role as it pertains to tax collection, revenue distribution, convening the regional oversight committee, and basically establishing all components of regional accountability. And then it defines the county's role pertaining to all that is necessary for policy and programmatic guidance around implementing the program, as long as it's in accordance with our approved local implementation plan. And of course, our commitment to reporting on the outcomes towards those housing goals and equity goals to Metro on established basis. So this is sort of standard function of an intergovernmental agreement, but for just sort of grounding and clarity's sake, I review that with you today. And the next slide really gets into the components of accountability structures. So the first set are accountability procedures that the counties will participate in. And the second set of bullets are Metro's accountability procedures and sort of a sense of the schedule. So you already are well familiar with the local implementation plan, that grounding framework document. This is a one-time plan, and we've already completed that step. Next, there will be quarterly programmatic reports, an annual work plan, and a spending plan that will be submitted every April, anticipating the future programmatic year. The counties and Metro have agreed to provide our annual approved budget for the program that demonstrates our commitment to maintain existing funding. As you will remember, that is a critical tenet of the measure and requirement of counties. We will also, of course, produce our annual outcomes report that will come in the October, the first quarter of the year, representing the last full year of programmatic implementation. So our first annual outcomes report to you and the Regional Oversight Committee would be scheduled for October of 2022. And then as needed, local implementation amendments are also described in depth in the intergovernmental agreement, though it is clear that these are only as needed when program is not on track to achieve the goals and outcomes that we've all committed to. And Metro has agreed that they will also contribute to annual or some rate of revenue projections. I think this is still in discussion, but at least twice a year, providing revenue projections so that the counties have clear understanding of how the revenue is expected to flow. And then also a report on their tax collection and administrative costs so that we understand the impact to the programmatic funds that we are receiving. So those are some of the components that are being written into the intergovernmental agreement, and you will see more when that document is finalized. Speaking of, the next slide quickly goes through our next steps to finalize the document. So it's underway right now. We do have a goal deadline for June 15th, which, as you know, is just next week. We are very close to finalizing all these details, but there are some big points still unfinished. So it's uncertain if we're going to meet this goal deadline. And for this reason, our lead attorney, Paul Hathaway, in partnership with the other attorneys, have been working on what is called a revenue sharing agreement. It's sort of an alternative or a short-term IGA. It will allow funds to be released starting on July 1st in lieu of the finalized IGA, and basically establishes an understanding that funds will begin to flow and all parties will commit to the future agreements written into the intergovernmental agreement around accountability procedures and all of the components of legal and fiscal protections of that future intergovernmental agreement. So that document is nearing its final draft, and one of these two documents will be ready for your board's, the board's review and tentative action, which is currently scheduled for June 22nd. So it's a lot of work, all coming to head at a tight deadline, but on track as planned to begin the program as we've all envisioned and committed to the public for July 1st. So the next bit of our, and the final bit of our presentation is around that programmatic revenue projections. And I turn it over to our colleague, Jack Lang, to take the lead here.
Thank you, Jess. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, Chair Harrington. Thank you for your time this morning. In front of you over here is two sets of projections that has been provided by Metro. And the second line under the headline over there is a projection that estimate that Metro provided back in October 2020. And then the next line is actually what they budgeted, and which is based on their latest projections. Obviously, the column that we have the most interest in at Washington County is really the right-hand most column, where we can see that the original projection really provides $38 million in terms of annual revenue for fiscal year 21-22. And what we have recently heard from them is that it can go as much as upward of $50 million. So that is actually good news that we would be anticipating some additional revenues. But please keep in mind, when they budget at the Metro level for the fiscal year 2022, they really do budget at the upper level, just so they have ample appropriations. If the fund hits that level, they have the appropriations to get it out. So I think we can treat that 38 million to the 50 million as a reasonable range of expectations. They can go as much as 50 million, as little as 38 million. So in a way, this is a good news that we have received from Metro, which is the amount of the funding is expected to be more than originally estimated. If we can go to the next slide. The next slide actually provides a little illustration of a similar tax, different but similar tax that was implemented, and then its collection pattern in the first 15 months. So what we have recently learned from Metro, which is different from our earlier expectation slightly, is that the bulk of the tax is expected to be collected in April. Although that we do have a quarterly tax payments that is required for employers, and some individuals actually do make their estimated tax payments on a during the year, but really the bulk is going to happen in April. And we will see some collections from from the earlier months of the year, but really for this calendar year, what we're anticipating and what Metro is anticipating that we're hearing is that we most likely won't see the majority of the funding come in until this coming April when the tax collections are due. So what that leads into is that actually we have convened, as Jess has provided, the CFOs in the 3 counties as well as Metro has convened multiple times in the last month to discuss about the tax and how it's going to be collected, the future pattern of it. And then what resulted in those meetings is that we are going to be forming a financial review team that works together continuously throughout the life of this tax. And that is consists of the CFOs within each one of the 3 counties with Metro, as well as financial staff that is relevant to the project. So the goal of that is we will continue to monitor for the revenue collections. As Jess mentioned, that there will be iterative reporting requirements, but really the CFOs will actually look at those on a more iterative basis, a little more ongoing basis, just because this tax is highly economic driven. It really depends on the employment, really depends on the business health, the economic condition. So we figure that it is very essential for the CFOs to come in regularly and monitor the tax collections along with the City of Portland, who is the collecting agents for this entire tax. So that work is underway, and the good news is that we will be getting more money, we'll be getting more funding this year, and the not so great news is that the funding is not coming as early as we originally anticipated that it would. So that's the latest financial update that we got from Metro. Next slide, please. I'll hand it back to Jess real quickly to talk about what we have thought about as far as the programming costs and what are the programs that will go into that will begin in July and then could potentially last till the end of the fiscal year and until April when the funding comes in.
Thank you, Jack. So board, very quickly, this is a list of components of program funding that we are expecting to get off the ground and begin implementing July 1st. Again, all in working in unison, tracking towards those annual goals that we have established for this program in its first year. So in order to do all of the work that we have been discussing, we have contracts to service providers planning to go out and begin funding those services for case management at the first of the year, as well as bridge shelter programs at the Loa Inn and the Econo Lodge with partners who've been selected to operate and provide services at those buildings. We also have that regional long-term rent assistance, that tool to keep rent permanently affordable for individuals, expected to be available July 1st. Those wraparound supports and peer supports, behavioral health supports, also going out by way of service contracts and capacity building grants to support the beginning work and building that capacity for organizations to be ready to deliver these services in our community. So all of these contracts or actions, programmatic actions, are expected to have been planned to begin July 1st, as well as all the staff needed to support this work in our Department of Housing Services and Health and Human Services and the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. And to do all of this work, of course, requires available funding, which is why Jack is here to brief you on the status of that need.
Thank you, Jess. So I have worked with the housing staff to estimate, all of this great work that is going in, and then we're not anticipating the bulk of the tax dollars to come in right away in July. What would that cost look like? And what we ended up estimating is a total of $13.64 million for housing, supportive housing services program costs, and that includes the $1.14 million interfund loan that your board has previously approved back in March to support the startup for the supportive housing services. So this really would means is that we need to find temporary funding solutions for supportive housing services for about $12.5 million, and that is we are actually recommending an additional interfund loan, anticipating that it will be returned by the tax revenue as soon as the April tax comes in, which is definitely anticipated to be enough to pay back this interfund loan within the same fiscal year. And that is what we are anticipating. And I want to add that we are learning as we go as far as the tax collection goes, because while we're not going to get the bulk, there will be smaller doses of the revenues being distributed by Metro before April. So while we want to get authorization to for this additional $12.5 million interfund loan, it may not necessarily be fully utilized. We will continuously monitor the tax revenue comes in and use that to offset the need of this interfund loan as well. All right, back to you, Jess.
I believe we turn it over to Josh at this moment. Next slide, please.
Good morning, Chair Harrington and board. Just quickly for the record, my name is Josh Kreitz. I'm the Assistant Director for the Housing Department. So Ty and Jack just did a really great job explaining the financials and all the partners that we want to work with to get this program. So I just want to ground us back in those year one outcome goals, right? And those are to 500 supportive housing placements, again, getting 500 chronically homeless individuals into housing with services, 500 additional households achieving housing stability, preventing homelessness for many families and individuals, 100 year-round shelter beds added to our current capacity. And I think as Ty and Jess did a marvelous job explaining early in our presentation, capacity building underway for culturally specific network, which again, they've done just such a great job with that work. And those housing outcomes are going to demonstrate advancement of racial equity. Next slide, please. And as Jess has talked about at the beginning, and we get to look at the timeline, we really want to talk about that accountability, our accountability to you, the board, our accountability to Metro, and most of all, our accountability to the community to meet these goals and to work through all these different program implementation issues. So I like looking at this chart because we all remember in January, the first time we came and talked about where we're at. It started in January, and at the time it ended in July with implementation. And now it's starting with implementation and just outlining the different checkpoints that we're going to have with your board and with our community for the accountability. So we're looking forward to that. And as Jess mentioned, our first one being in October, to getting folks housed, getting people sheltered, and getting those services turned on. Next slide, please. So this kind of leads us to the end of the presentation. We wanted to end with these three very important board policy direction kind of questions. So I'll kind of go over them and then turn it over to your board, Chair Harrington and commissioners. Does the board have additional feedback or direction regarding equitable procurement procedures for the SHS program? 2, does the board have any questions about IGA developments to date? And 3, does the board have any concerns about an interfund loan to launch a SHS program as planned on July 1st until revenue reaches expected program capacity? Thank you.
Go ahead, Jack.
Sorry, Chair Harrington. I forgot to mention one key fact about the interfund loan is we're looking across the county's portfolio to look for the fund that has the fund balance to support a $12.5 million interfund loan. And then my recommendation would be the most logical funds to loan this fund balance out of would be the Strategic Investment Program Fund and the Gain Share Fund in a combination. The Strategic Investment Program Fund has about $11 million in fund balance, and Gain Share has about 3.5 in fund balance. That's why the combination is needed. I just don't want that to come as a surprise when the interfund loan approval agenda shows up.
So before we turn to board questions and comments, I do want to recognize that one of our Housing Authority Board of Director colleagues, Ms. Carolyn Roper, has been attending this presentation as well. And I really appreciate that because we work very closely with our Housing Authority, not only for the affordable housing that the authority owns and operates, but also in partnership for supportive housing and permanent supportive housing programs as well. So thank you for joining us, Ms. Roper. All right, commissioners, who would like to go first? Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Hi, good morning. What a great presentation. This is obviously a brand new program and has lots of pieces to it, and you've done a great job of pulling this all together. I just get to listen to the services and programs and things that you've all pulled together because that's certainly outside of my understanding, and so I'm just trusting that you are all moving ahead. And I love the part about wraparound services, and so there's just a lot of things to it that's brand new to me, but it just sounds pretty exciting that we're going to be able to provide these significant enhancement of these services to our county folks. And so I'm looking forward to that. What I always kind of keep my eye on, though, from day one has been the program revenue, the revenue allocations, and making sure that that Washington County gets to basically keep the money that we have contributed to this fund. So I go back to Jack's slide showing that the original estimate was for Washington County was 38.3 million, and then the budget is potentially up to 50 million. And so again, that's an exciting thing. I remember way back when this was still in the design, hadn't been brought to the voters yet. 250 million total was the projected, I guess, vision for how much money this could be raised and how much money, how this would work between the three counties. So I just want to make sure that one of our primary focuses is that we maintain our 1/3 allocation, and I certainly would like to know as we move forward on it how much of Washington County actually contributes to the overall package. And so, so I think that's probably one of my primary concerns. So with that, if I remember correctly, and I can't remember if it's the first 2 years or the first 3 years in the IGA that we are committed to receive basically 1/3, 33.33% of the revenue projections. So I'll need Jack to, or someone to confirm that for me. Second question is the $13.64 million of program costs that you've shown in a couple of slides later, I think. Yeah, 2 slides later, supportive housing programs. Is that 13.64, is that basically going to be our annual program cost of this, of administrating this program, or is there a lot of upfront costs in there, and that allocation will move downward as we move into longer term implementation of these programs? So maybe I'll stop there. I just tossed out 2 questions. So
I'll confirm the first question. That is our understanding that the fund distribution formula is locked in for 2 years, and then the legislation does have a language that allows flexibility for adjustments after 2 years.
And what are those?
It is that 33.33% for Washington County. Yeah.
Right, but I mean, after 2 years, then there are some criteria that we have to meet to maintain that or be able to increase that. I mean, is that the maximum allocation that we're going to get? And so what's the criteria for us sustaining this program with that money and possibly increased money?
So Jess might have a...
I can attempt to answer. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. So the 33.3% is intended to represent what is believed to be our proportionate investment into the tax, as you asked, and what we would then get back. But that is an estimation that was agreed to by all the parties at the time of the referral of the measure. And so you're correct in remembering that at year 2, we will look at that to see if that 33.33% actually represents the actual revenue paid in from Washington County businesses and individuals. And that is a process that is being described in the Intergovernmental Agreement of how the parties will come back to evaluate the actual tax collection and then determine a new updated formula as needed that is representative of the actual tax collection. One thing to be mindful of, I think this will speak to your interests, is that some tax collection will be from outside of the regional area, from businesses in other parts of the country. And so there will be discussion about how that revenue is allocated. So it's a more complicated process than just looking at what Washington County businesses and individuals put into the tax collection, but the IGA will determine that all parties are a part of that reevaluation based on the information we have to the best of our abilities at that time at year 2.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I needed to hear that. Along those lines, I do know that there's after year 2, there's this reevaluation criteria of what things we have accomplished and what programs we are going to implement. I just want to make sure, I think, that our IGA and our services that we are anticipating actually meets the criteria that we have a need for here in Washington County, kind of not what maybe Metro thinks is best for us, or some other organization, I guess, but what we and your team has put together as this is the way we envision this. These are the services that we desperately need for our county, and I just want to make sure that that's first and foremost in what our priorities are, and we don't have someone else dictating those. So I may be paranoid about that. I just want to make sure that we have our programs are what exactly we need, because I know that you've got a good handle on that. So last question is, and I appreciate, Chair, thank you very much for giving me the first on this. Jack, you said that the fund balance would provide the 13.64 million that we need for carryover funds. What I missed was when did you say you think the funds are actually going to come into the county? I missed that date.
So Commissioner Willie, I would just at this stage beg that you have a briefing with Jack on your numbers of interest and the flow of the dollars. They're good questions, but I think that the level
No,
of
I was just asking for a date and a date of when he says the fund balances. 2 dates, and then I'll be quiet.
But I would encourage you to sit down and have an additional briefing with staff.
I'd love to do that. Thank you.
So we're planning to come to your board on the same date, July 22nd, for approval of the interfund loan, as well as a supplemental budget specifically for this purpose, just because we need to get the program rolling. And then the fund will not be released in one go, just because the program will be rolled out throughout the year. So we're planning on quarterly loan issuance from one fund to another. And then the tax dollars will come in small doses throughout the year. And then the large bulk is going to be collected in April. By the time we get it at the county, it could potentially be May, actually, or even June, definitely before the end of the fiscal year. So that's why we anticipate a full repayment of the loan before the end of the fiscal year.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Other commissioners, questions, comments, answers to the 3 questions that staff has asked each of us? Commissioner Rogers.
Yeah, I won't go on too long. I'll just ask a series of questions and maybe you can get back to me. One, this is not criticism because you've done so doggone much work, and I feel like I'm at the last hour now, kind of reviewing the homework and saying, well, how does that all make sense? But in regard to the number of vendors, I put on my business hat, and we're used to, you got a product that you want to sell, in this case, a series of products, and you know what your end result is, so what your goal is. And you put vendors in places where you know that they'll work best for you. I don't really understand the coordination of that many vendors. It just seems like that would be very difficult to be trying to have them work with one another. Continuum of care, it would be like a hospital. You go in, and instead of using their doctors and nurses, you'd have all these other vendors coming in doing various things. So maybe you can spend some time with me in understanding that at some point. Jerry's comment was right on in regard to the question on distribution. I've never been certain whether it's population or income based, but the way that measure was written, I have a very sneaking suspicion that the income levels and corporate levels of taxes are going to be heavily borne by Washington County, simply because of our demographics and economics. So I think what he might be asking, and I'm not going to ask him to clarify, but that's a good question. If we're paying in 45%, are people going to say, well, but you're not 45% of the population? So it's an interesting question to ask. In regard to the loan, I've never been opposed. It's just a terrible timing because our tax revenues come in November, as we all know. And a lot of your treasury, I've always been wanting to ask, and Jack, this will get to you not today, but later, maybe you can do it offline, is a lot of your treasury is Clean Water Services money. You know that they park a lot of money with you. So how much of this money is really coming out of the county, and how much of it is being used because you're the treasury function for other activities, not just clean water, but all of the special service districts that we have as well? Are you using their money to make this? And I'm hoping not. And my
Yeah.
last money,
Definitely not.
all right, okay, we and I can talk offline. My last question in that regard is I'm not so, I guess, keen on saying, I mean, you're taking out of the SIP and you're taking it out of, I forgot the other fund you want, but it
Gain
seems
share.
like it, gain share. Why not general fund? I mean, if that's where if we're committed to a program, why not those? That makes some sense to me. So that's my questions. You don't have to answer them now, but I, like Commissioner Willie, wouldn't mind a briefing and understanding how, from a business prospect, this is working. Not from what we want to accomplish. It's a good program, but what's the business case and how's it all going to work? So those are my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Roger. If I may try to provide a 10-second answer to why not general fund, is our general fund budgeted contingency for this next fiscal year is about 3 million and some change. So from a fund balance perspective, it doesn't have the budget appropriation or the contingency in there to absorb this level of loan. Now, just a quick reminder is the SIP fund balance is actually considered in the grand scheme of things as a part of general fund's fund balance and reserve. And that is from a technical perspective, that is a fund that has the room essentially to absorb the loan without too much budget adjustments. That's just a quick and simple answer for that. I can definitely find the time to brief you offline as well on that.
Commissioners Treese or Phi, do you have any questions or comments for the 3 questions that have been asked?
I don't have any additional questions but I will say in terms of the first question you've asked, Josh, that I know I've heard from smaller construction companies that would like to participate in this supportive housing, and they were concerned that they're going to be overwhelmed by big construction businesses. So I think being cognizant for the mom and pop shops of those businesses to participate. But that's the only comment I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Phi. Commissioner Treese, any comments, questions?
No, I don't have any. I'm just really pleased with the work that's been done. I think that I appreciate Commissioner Rogers and Commissioner Willie keeping their eye on the financial aspects. I appreciate that, but I do want to just send out kudos to all the work that has been done. And it is, Josh, to your point, wonderful to look at the timeline starting with July and implementation. So thank you.
Terrific. So I start with, I find myself pinching myself again, because here we are, the voters of Washington County, while we were dealing with this unknown, mysterious pandemic and closing schools, closing businesses, operations, and the economy teetering, the voters of Washington County chose to join the voters of the region to step forward and provide funds to help their fellow neighbors deal with this challenging problem of ensuring that everyone has the support needed, particularly for those who've been suffering from chronic homelessness or are on the verge of homelessness. So I just continue to be thrilled with that. On your 3 questions, I'm really impressed by our team. Not only do we have a great finance team that's figuring out how we navigate through the collections of this new program, the revenue collections, and then balance that with the costs and implementation of these services. I'm full confidence in all of you. What is incredibly new also is the level of new service provision to meet the needs of our community. I'm totally impressed with how you went about the RFPQ and the number of firms that you have announced as of today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You have a great suite of essentially pre-qualified, or not just essentially, actually pre-qualified service providers who have the range through that whole collection, the range of different service experience that is needed to address the needs of the community. So on your three questions, on the equitable procurement procedures, as I looked at slides 4 and 8, I want to make sure that as we move forward, we had discussion with our LIP to make sure that there are family wages and benefits for the people, the employees of these service provider companies. And I want to make sure that we are following through with responsible contract language. So as I looked at slide 8 as well, I want to make sure that you know that how we develop contracts in meeting those goals is really important to me. So it's not something for how we get through the IGA process, but making sure in our various master contracts and so forth for the service providers that we reach that goal. And I want to make sure we've memorialized the need to reach those goals as well. And I'm happy to talk more offline. On your second question, does the board have feedback and direction with regard to the IGA negotiations? Well, I can say that I will be more comfortable once I have the opportunity to see the IGA, but I will await with bated breath until you have a version June 15th to share with us, and then probably making sure that I have a briefing with all of you, and it may be appropriate for all commissioners leading up to the board adoption on the 22nd. On slide 11, under county accountability procedures, you talked about those different reports, and I want to make sure that not only as a liaison for this program, but just for all board members that we receive those. And in reading the first ever Metro Affordable Housing Bond LIP, I was caught a little flat-footed on a little information there, and Elizabeth is helping me catch up on that and look into some improvements. Then on the interfund loan, I'm totally supportive of that because not only of the need, but also that Jack is following through on the details. Oops, I forgot one mention. And that goes back to the IGA. I want to make sure that there is acknowledgement of the Metro SHS Oversight Committee and their role, because it's a journey for all of us. And I know what it's like to be on both sides of the dais, so to speak. Metro, as well as now county. And it's one reason why I insisted that each of the counties have a position, an ex officio position on the Metro Oversight Committee, because it is a journey for all of us. And we are all needing to work together on this regional problem. And I'm not sure that that is fully understood. So the question I have for you, team, and we'll we'll be more than happy to discuss moving forward, but I wonder about memorializing it perhaps in the IGA is how can I be more effective in getting this concept across? Because I think it's an important one. So those are my thoughts as we move forward in these pivotal milestones and get to both a finalized and adopted IGA, but as you move forward with the implementation of all these services for the benefit of our community. Any questions on my feedback from any of you? All righty. Anything to close from anyone? Then I'll close the topic. I think you've done a great job with this presentation. You covered a lot of territory, and I think we're getting ready to go.
Thank you,
All right.
commissioners. Thank you,
Good
team.
job,
Thank you,
team.
commissioners.
Good job. All right. Well, with that, we have one more topic that is pretty short before we take a break, or do commissioners need to take the break now and then come back? 1, 2, 3, go. We will press on with the next topic, and it is to review the applications and recommendations for the appointment to the Public Safety Coordinating Council. And we have Erin Calvert. Take it away, Erin.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Harrington and Board of Commissioners. For the record, I'm Erin Calvert with the County Administrative Office. As mentioned, the purpose of this work session is to provide an overview of applications and recommendations to the Public Safety Coordinating Council, or the PSCC. The PSCC is a statutorily mandated committee that's convened by your board for the purpose of developing and recommending plans for the use of state resources respective to the coordination of local criminal justice and juvenile justice policy. The council meets 6 times per year, which is every other month starting in January. As your board is aware, the PSCC has been working over the past year to update the bylaws as well as our membership. And while the membership to PSCC is heavily dictated by statute, when adopting the most recent bylaws in July of 2020, your board added 4 community members to the council, making a total of 5, given the 1 position that is directed by statute. And then last December, your board appointed 2 of those 4 members whose term started in January of 2021. At the time, your board held 2 vacancies over and asked staff to open another recruitment to increase membership from agencies that provide culturally specific services and or members of communities of color, as the bylaws were prioritizing membership more inclusive of our diverse community. So the recruitment period was open from April 6th to May 18th, and 3 applications were received. And those applications have been forwarded to your board as part of today's packet. Interviews were held on May 26th via a subcommittee that was formed by the PSCC Chair, Lindsay Coppinger, that included herself, Commissioner Willie, Juvenile Services Director Lynn Schroeder, and Community Corrections Director Steve Berger. And all 3 candidates had excellent interviews. They provided a wide breadth and depth of life experiences and applicable skills, but 2 candidates were selected for recommendation for appointment. And I can briefly highlight the candidate profiles now. First is Fernando Lira. He's a resident of Hillsborough, District 4. He's passionate about serving his community and civic engagement in general. He values different perspectives and collaborative relationships. A recent graduate of Pacific University, he's put his passion into practice and led a number of initiatives, one of those being part of opening the first student multicultural center, where he serves in a role to further assist students of color. Fernando is a member of the Sheriff's Office Latino Advisory Commission, and he identifies as Latino, Hispanic, and male. Second is Rosemary Brewer. She is a resident of Washington County District 2. She's worked as an attorney on the East Coast and now in Oregon. She has experience working in the felony drug court in Maryland and is passionate about working collaboratively with partners to improve systems. She is currently the executive director of Oregon Crime Victims Law Center and continues to work closely with victims of crime who have felt marginalized by the system. She would like to bring additional perspectives toward more equitable alternatives. And while her professional lens will be valuable to the council, we're really excited that she's applying as a community member. She identifies as white and female. If your board agrees with these recommendations, this can come back for appointment on the June 22nd business meeting. And just a note, these are currently midterm because we held them over. And so the appointment would begin July 1 and go through December 31st of 2022. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, any questions or comments?
Just to weigh in real quickly is, yes, I sat in on the interviews and these two candidates are going to be an excellent addition. So I would recommend that you approve them.
And Commissioner Treese and Commissioner Fye, I did see your thumbs up. Commissioner Willie, any Rogers, thumbs up. Okay, I have a couple of questions. I appreciate that you mentioned, Aaron, why we left these two positions open based on that. And Fernando Lira's experience in the candidate profile. I can see that's a good choice. I have a question though, with regard to appointing Rosemary Brewer, given our what we were seeking to accomplish. While I appreciate in this candidate profile that it talks about her role of working closely with victims of crime, I did remind myself that we have a victim services agency on the council already. And I see that she wants to bring additional perspective towards more equitable alternatives. I don't know if that's just a goal or if she has real experience in achieving that. Because what we said we were looking for is someone with more equity experience already, not just someone who's interested, because we as a board expressed that we recognize we want to reach these goals and we need people with said experience. So can you help me understand that, please?
Absolutely. I can tell you what I've been told, and then maybe Commissioner Willie, because since he was on the interview panel, if you have more to add, that would be great. But from what I understand, and your point is well taken, she actually could qualify under the victim serving agency position. She had also reached out to presiding Judge Roberts to be considered for the presiding judge appointment of a member of the bar. And so she was kind of weighing all of those things and wanting to apply as a community member. My understanding of her experience as in her executive director role is delivering culturally specific services to victims of crime and being part of that in her agency. But I would have to get more detail on that experience unless that came out in the interview process that Commissioner Willie might know more.
No, I think what she brings to the table, I believe, is a broad experience so she has obviously her expertise and her work experience brings a different perspective possibly to the table for us to have conversations with. And I think we were just impressed with her perspective on this, her desire to bring that knowledge, but also, learn what it is that we are doing on this commission. So I think we were really pleased with her work experience and how that would incorporate into our conversations.
So for me, then it still isn't quite clear that the direction from the board has been achieved. But I will lay my hope on the statement that was expressed that as the executive director of the Oregon Crime Victims Law Center, that Rosemary Brewer has experience in delivering culturally specific services. So that's what I would be hanging my hat on. So without that, I don't think that that appointment would have reached the goal that the Board of Commissioners set out for these two remaining positions. So, okay, thank you very much for allowing.
We'll do a little bit more work on that prior to getting it before the board for on your agenda for June 22nd. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, so we've been at it for a little bit this morning, and we have several more items on the agenda still. So at this stage of the game, we'll take a 15-minute break and reconvene at 10:30 with agenda item number 4. See you back here soon. I thought about going and sitting in the auditorium for the meeting, but then I'd have to wear a mask the whole time. I'd rather people get to see my smile than anything else. But it is nice being in the building. I don't have to worry about internet bandwidth. Okay, commissioners, how are we doing? Is everybody back now? Hello, Commissioner Willie. Commissioner Rogers, are you back? Well, I will assume he is there. He is. Great. All righty, so we'll pick back up with the Board of Commissioners work session and our next topic, a legislative update. So I'll turn it over to our great team members, Jagjit Nagra, Aaron Doyle, and Paige Spence. Take it away, team.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. So good morning, Board, Chair. For the record, my name is Jagjit Nagra, Government Relations Manager here at Washington County. This morning, I'm joined by the full county lobby team, Paige Spence and Aaron Doyle. We have quite a bit to talk about today, so let's get underway. Next slide, please. So here's our agenda, just a bunch of bullet points. We'll start off with our tried and true legislative timeline, which is coming to a very short close, as you'll see in the next slide. And then we're going to dump into really the bulk of the conversation that's just broken up by functional areas. I'm hoping, and this is a hope, that there'll be a bit of a recapitulation within this presentation. What I mean by that is, you recall, before this legislative session, we proposed a legislative agenda. That legislative agenda contained priorities, which the board blessed and adopted. And today there's going to be a bit of a circle back on those. We will be providing more information on that capitulation notion as we do our legislative session summary, which will be on July 13th. Constitutional sine die. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So here's our legislative timeline. Two critical dates. One is the 18th, which is the target sine die. If I were a betting man, I would probably bet that the legislature will not adjourn by this date. And then we have our constitutional sine die, which is the 27th. We'll probably be wrapping up much closer to then. This kind of dovetails nicely with the fact that our July 13th session wrap or session summary gives us 2 weeks to amass the bills that pass, do our analysis, get a nice presentation for your board, your consideration, and also some materials in writing vis-a-vis our GR weekly memo. So with that, we can move to our next slide. And I'll hand it off to Paige Spence. Thank you, Board.
Great, thank you, Jagjit. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Can I get a thumbs up that I'm coming through okay? Okay, thanks. My internet was real weird yesterday. Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for as always, your time and attention to the legislative work. I don't think seeking any board direction in this slide. This is mostly intended to be informational just because of the nature of where we are in session. Your board has been excellent in providing the needed direction to us. And so just want to provide some updates, but I'm happy to answer questions. And as Jagjit mentioned, these are updates pertaining to your board adopted priorities prior to session. And I should note that really housing and homelessness, especially here, should also say COVID-19 relief, because as you'll recall, these are obviously so intertwined. So in the housing and homelessness section, some updates that I'm pleased to share with you of bills that have passed or are advancing this session. So under the first bullet of foreclosure moratorium, House Bill 2009 has been signed into law. And through this legislation, Oregon homeowners with a federally or non-federally backed mortgage are protected from foreclosure and should have access to mortgage payment forbearance. The initial period passed in this bill only lasts until June 30th, which is right around the corner. But by June 14th, the governor can decide to extend the protection period for 90 days. So that would be through the end of September. And the statute allows her to do that again one more time at the end of September, which would get us through the end of this calendar year. So I will let your board know in an upcoming GR memo if the governor does extend the foreclosure moratorium past June 30th. I would imagine that she will. And then the second bullet on tenant and landlord protections. I shared information with your board in last week's government relations memo regarding the landlord compensation fund, since that had come up at our last discussion. So I just wanted to remind you that the state is providing landlords with some relief. Again, that's 80 cents on the dollar for missed rent payments since the beginning of Oregon's state of emergency for COVID-19. And our housing department has put together really informative one-pagers together for Washington County residents regarding that landlord compensation fund, and also for the emergency rental assistance program, which is federal, through which eligible households in the county are encouraged to apply for assistance with rent, utilities, and other housing related expenses. And then finally, under support for the homeless, government relations has been really focused the last couple of weeks on lobbying for full funding of 2 continuous state programs, which are the Emergency Housing Assistance Program. That one assists folks who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless. And then for the State Homeless Assistance Program, which helps meet the needs of emergency shelters and supportive services to shelter residents. So now we're just waiting to see the final budget bills pop out to identify the allocations for these programs. And then pivoting to House Bill 3115, as a reminder, this is the bill that provides that any local law regulating sitting, lying, or sleeping outdoors on public property open to the public must be reasonable as to time, place, and manner. That bill has passed the House and passed its Senate committee, and now is awaiting a Senate floor vote. It's kind of been hanging out for the last couple of weeks, as are many bills, as the process just kind of makes its way through. So I will be updating your board and housing staff when we see activity there. And then I also wanted to let you know that House Bill 2006 has been signed into law. This is the bill that Speaker Kotek had introduced in the 2020 session, and again this year requiring local governments like ours to allow siting of emergency shelters, notwithstanding local land use laws and regulations. And it sunsets July 1, 2022. Are there any questions in the housing and homelessness realm before I move over to Health and Human Services? Okay. Great, I'll keep going, and then I know we have time for questions on our last slide of the overall presentation as well. So Health and Human Services, starting with behavioral health, this has really been the meatiest issue area and an incredibly important one throughout session. So I want to start with the aid and assist liability protection, and I provided background information in this week's government relations about just how important it is to provide liability protection for our community mental health program and for others around the state, given the continued and escalating crises at the Oregon State Hospital and the need to serve folks in their own communities. What we have tried was introducing Senate Bill 198, which was state indemnification, and that bill is in Ways and Means. However, I do not expect it to pass. The legislature has had to be grappling with, as you may imagine, all sorts of questions around liability in the workplace and in other settings regarding COVID-19. And there has just been, we just have not been able to get this one across the finish line. So Plan B, I'm thrilled to share for a short-term fix to help address our liability concerns. Oregon Health Authority, after political pressure from counties, has identified up to $5 million per county to reimburse counties who purchase excess general liability insurance associated with serving increased numbers of people under aid and assist orders. And this funding will be available during the 21-23 biennium. And I've been talking with County Council and Risk Management and HHS, and we will all be working with the Oregon Health Authority in June to determine the best mechanisms for implementing this reimbursement fund. And this is a short-term fix, like I said. This is liability insurance that is a one-time issuance from the Oregon Health Authority. So I want to go ahead and just plant the seed of what the next steps are going to be to address this issue. So in the interim, after this session, the legislature is poised to host a table at the statewide level, including representatives of behavioral health consumers, providers, community mental health programs, counties, CCOs, really everyone involved in the system, to realign goals and to also address the significant risk in the behavioral health system. So the table would identify some metrics and develop incentives to really drive long-term change in behavioral health, and including revising or updating county contracts where perhaps the liability connection could be made. And then another important conversation at this table will be how to ensure statewide access to culturally and linguistically relevant behavioral health services, and to truly move towards parity between behavioral health and physical health providers. So it'll be setting up a constructive dialogue in the interim with all the impacted parties. So again, this is not, the long-term real goal outcome met that we were hoping to achieve this legislative session, but I do believe we brought the right folks to the table to understand the importance of the issue and to get that short-term fix, the insurance route, and then move forward on a longer-term policy. And then, this session really, I can't emphasize enough just how significant it has been for behavioral health. There is a $500 million statewide funding proposal that in late May, the Joint Ways and Means Human Services Subcommittee chairs, Rep. Nose from Portland, and one of Washington County delegation's true rising stars, Senator Kate Lieber, who is the Senate co-chair for the Human Services Subcommittee. She just really gets behavioral health crisis in our state, and she really gets the budget framework required to enable real progress. The package includes workforce stabilization, community mental health program funding. I heard from Nick, our behavioral health CMHP director yesterday, that we've lost between 40 and 45% of our CMHP staff during COVID. And we're hearing that in other counties, the same workforce challenges are very prevalent. And so we're thrilled to see some workforce stabilization in there and funding aside from the state hospital to do work at the community level, and as well the upcoming 988 National Crisis Line implementation. I will say that we are not likely to see a full $500 million package in the resulting bill, but likely we'll see a $300 to $400 million package. But still, this is the most robust behavioral health funding to come from the Oregon legislature in a long time. And there's a lot to be excited about, even though we have a lot of work to do, and it will take time to see exactly how the money will flow from these new funding streams. But it's exciting and good progress. And then I want to finish with some other good news around public health modernization funding, one of your board adopted priorities. As you'll recall, the governor's recommended budget had included $30 million for public health modernization, which was a significant reduction from what the agency Oregon Health Authority had requested, around $70 million. So what we're hearing right now is about a happy medium between 40 and 45 million coming for public health modernization. And again, just have to sort of wait now to see that budget bill pop out, but I feel good about the advocacy that we've been able to do and how Senator Lieber and others have really gotten the importance of doing this now. So the Oregon Health Authority budget is likely one of the last ones that we'll see pass out of the legislature, just because of the myriad of complexities facing the health authority from COVID-19 and the behavioral health needs in our state. So I will be sure to update your board once we see final numbers. And that is all that I had for you today as an update on where our board adopted priorities stand now in the final weeks of session. And I'm happy to take any questions, and thanks again for your continued support of our work. And with that, I can turn it over to Kevin to please move to the next slide.
Good morning again, board. Erin Doyle here to provide some updates. One thing that is not on the slide, because this information is recently breaking. Yesterday, we heard from Congresswoman Bonamici's office that the transportation reauthorization bill draft form was dropped, and it included the $4 million for TV highway. This is great news. It's in the markup version right now. The committee is currently taking up potential amendments. We don't foresee that the earmark will come out of that process. The bill will continue through its House process, and as Congresswoman Bonamici stated, the hope is to have it on the floor for a vote by the full House by the end of the month. It then has to go through the process of reconciliation with the Senate, and this is where we have to do our next big push, because it has not been made crystal clear that the Senate is accepting earmarks this year for the reauthorization package. Prognostication, which is always a dangerous game in my world, but I'll do it anyway today, is that if it's in on the House side, that is a strong likelihood that we will find some funding for TP Highway come out of this process, provided we can get the ball over the line of actually having a transportation reauthorization package make it all the way through the House and Senate reconciliation. So this is the first step in a series of hopefully good news updates that will provide coming out of the federal legislative process on transportation. So with that, turning to what's on the slide and further direct spending requests. Last time we were before the board, we had the conversation around we have no idea what's going on. We've seen some announcements from the state delegation about what they have and have not requested, and we did not provide you any clarity on what we believed was coming out of the Washington County series of requests. We still haven't seen a formal bill or even the framework for the bill that's coming out now, but more and more folks are announcing what their requests have been of the process. So we're going to go ahead and prognosticate on those as well. What we have heard from the Washington County delegation is while we had a lot of great projects, they were really only going to provide funding probably for our small business assistance and the transit program down in the southern part of Washington County. That those dollars would be combined into a single request for us, and then we would be directed. We've been working with our internal team to figure out what the structure of that request needs to be so that we can properly spend the money as the state has to do their processes. While we also think we might be the pass-through agency for some funding for park bathroom improvements for Tualatin Hills Park and Rec, but we're still not 100% certain how they're going to structure that. But it would basically be just a clean from us to them, all the money going probably to Tualatin Hills Park and Rec. I will say that as your team went through that process, we did reach out to all of our park holding local government partners, including the cities, and we had put in a pretty broad request for a number of bathrooms that have been cited for needing improvement. But we think the only requests that will be funded are those for Tualatin Hills Park and Rec. It's just a matter of will it come through Washington County or will it just go directly to the Parks Department? While it was noted that we had great housing projects, none of the members decided to put our housing projects forward as their request, but instead some nonprofit partners will be probably seeing funding come out of these direct allocations. So there will be further improvements to low-income housing within the county, just not directed through our housing authority. However, at this point in time, we are still waiting to see what that final version looks like and what the final funding numbers are. I believe the state is still doing its due diligence to make sure that they're meeting the guidance around the ARPA funding or finding alternative means of funding projects that were put forward through perhaps a general fund. So we don't know what the final bill will look like or how it will be demarcated, but we are working to make sure that once we get our funds, we know how we're supposed to spend them. With that, I will answer questions related to that if we have them. Otherwise, I'll move on to transportation and workforce to get through those really quickly. Okay, seeing no questions, I will move on. So these on transportation, these two bills relate to the priority that the board adopted at the beginning of the year to basically find long-term funding solutions for transportation infrastructure and also to look at the tolling program to make sure our regional bottlenecks and congestion management are addressed. So House Bill 2342 would establish a mandatory vehicle miles traveled program for cars starting in 2026 for cars that are model year 2027 or later and have a 30 miles per gallon MPG rating. Right now, that bill is sitting in Ways and Means to see if it can be financed for the requirements that ODOT would have to put into place in order to start establishing that program. It's still not fully fleshed out. There are still some political questions to be answered about the policies to be set up, but it is kind of setting the marker and the road of this is when we will be moving from these types of really high efficiency vehicles from a gas tax into a road user fee. So that's in the Ways and Means process. It's still kind of cloudy if it will actually get the funding it needs, but we probably know the direction the state is headed. House Bill 3055 is a very long and very technical transportation omnibus bill, doing a lot of changes to a lot of different pieces of the transportation statute. What's really important to the county and from the county's perspective is that this is the bill that has become the vehicle for updating the language around the state's potential tolling program on the interstate system here in the metro region. The adopted amendment included most of the language that had been negotiated in 3065 amongst the local government partners. The piece that did get left out was related to a requirement that ODOT update any design standards related to any mitigation we see from congestion pricing. It's very much a political question of which comes first, the tolling or the design standards. That question is not being answered this session. I imagine that conversation will continue to move forward. But the 3055 as amended does continue to align with the county stated priorities of addressing those regionally recognized bottlenecks within our interstate system and the need to do congestion mitigation work and change behaviors, not just change the infrastructure. So that bill is also sitting in Ways and Means. There is also a portion of that bill that's related to aviation fuel that makes it a 3/5 vote. However, the expectation is that piece will be moved out of that bill and placed into a revenue raising bill so that all of the things are in an omnibus 3/5 majority vote, and this will go back to a simple majority vote as it moves through the Ways and Means process. That's all work that's being done, but basically we're kind of waiting and seeing the number of like the over 300 policy bills that are expected to come out of the Ways and Means process are slowly being addressed in the transportation world. With that, I'll move on to workforce very briefly. These two bills are ones that also align with the county stated priorities to see more investment in workforce development. Senate Bill 623, the COVID Recovery and Workforce Modernization Program, has been a strong effort from our workforce board partners like Work Systems, Inc. It is now awaiting the governor's signature. This is good news because it allows a regional approach to workforce investments and lets the regional groups discuss with its partners, such as Washington County, how to best address the needs of the workforce for purposes of recovery from COVID. And that's the starting process, but that cycle will continue into future years. This is a very exciting modernization and much needed relief to allow for a regional perspective as opposed to statewide efforts that may not match our needs. And finally, House Bill 2092, which is on shakier ground, is also in the Ways and Means process. There is currently in statute an Oregon Youth Employment Program, but has never seen funding. House Bill 2092 would provide $11 million. Again, this is a high priority for our workforce Work Systems, Inc. partner. We are hoping that it'll move, but it is looking very doubtful that it will receive funding in this session, which is unfortunate, but we have been advocating to our delegation to try and see some education dollars go towards this program because we think it meets a vital need in Washington County. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have or turn it over to Gigi to finalize our update.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So let me start off with, and what I have here is what I would consider a smattering, a selection of equity bills. And these are equity bills that I've heard board members talk about. I've heard them talked about administratively, specifically looking at Juneteenth as a state holiday, and then just other curiosities. There are far more equity bills that were considered this legislation or legislative session. And again, when we have the session wrap, I'll be taking a deeper dive, but I wanted to give you just a bit of an overview here. In terms of Juneteenth as a state holiday, I know this will be dispositive in the sense of how we may or may not work with this holiday in terms of organization for the county itself. This is going to be moving back to the House for a concurrence vote. And as far as I can tell, it will be signed by the governor because it received such strong bipartisan support. So that's something to look forward to. It will be recognized as a state holiday. Another bill that will be signed into law is House Bill 2935. This is a carryover from the previous session. This is the Crown Act. And what it does is it prohibits race-based hair discrimination, for folks who are in the workplace or other publicly situated entities. Two bills that aren't, or well, three bills really that aren't moving ahead this session that the board did express interest in. Chair Harrington, I know you often ask me about voter access for incarcerated persons, and unfortunately this is not moving ahead this session. Similarly, with both House Bill 2353 and 2991, this is actually a conversation that I've had with Chair Harrington before this session and a few other board members, and also with our Chief Equity Officer, Latricia Tillman. This is the notion of having, in a nutshell, racial impact and or equity statements alongside policy proposals, right? And so at the state level, that would mean that a piece of legislation, let's say it would typically have an environmental impact statement, right? Well, now you would see an equity impact statement or perhaps a racial impact statement, and that could be for bills and for agency rules and everything in between. So these aren't moving forward, but I want to highlight these because much like the Crown Act, I don't view these as going away because I think the policies are sound. I think there's a progressive momentum to move this type of legislation. So it is likely that we will be seeing a return of these in a future legislative session. Also, that could be informative to some of the work that we adopt as a county organization. So switching gears to public safety, I want to start with an update that's not on the bill because it's so hot off the press. I'm sure by this point, the Commission is well aware that one of our county priorities in public safety is community corrections. I have been working on two main bills within that ecosystem. One is 5004. This is the Department of Corrections budget bill. This is how community corrections gets funded statewide, okay, in a nutshell. I've been advocating for $25 million statewide for community corrections. As of this morning, at 1 o'clock today, there is going to be a public work session, or excuse me, a public hearing, a work session at 1 o'clock. And in that bill is actually $32 million for community corrections. So that's 25 million for statewide. Let's not celebrate this yet. We got to get this signed by Governor Kay Brown, right? But I'm very optimistic about this. What it means is that all of our legwork for the past 2 years, ostensibly, even longer, has been listened to. 25 million is the 25 million that we've been asking for, the 25.6. The additional 7 mil to get to 32 is actually to, this was an unsurprised win. It was actually to deal with the population inflation POP package that was actually taken out of the governor's budget. So we got that back in pretty big. Now, let's go back to 2018 when we had our actual cost study, right? The tool that we utilized to actually shine a light on what it costs to do business in community corrections statewide. Well, there was a $50 million statewide hole. So even with this win, just remember, keep in mind that we are not magically in some great funding place. We are merely keeping the ship afloat. And that's why in the interim, we're going to be moving forward with our Washington County delegation with the help of Representative Solomon to figure out how we can have a more sustainable model in terms of funding community corrections statewide. So that's some really good news. Post 1 o'clock, I hope to have even some better news. House Bill 2002. This is much like Aaron was talking about in the transportation sphere. This is what I consider an omnibus public safety bill. The one area of this bill that causes a lot of problem for the county, which is why we've remained in a neutral posture with it, is again the elimination of the fees. So now, rather than eliminating fees, I've worked with the Partnership for Public Safety and Justice, the bill proponents, to help get our ask in, which is please don't eliminate our fees because we need those. Essentially, what they have done is that they've provided $5 to $6 million in the bill to help backfill this gap. However, our accounting shows that the actual gap would be $10 to $12 million. So effectively, what's happened there, we've halved our income from those fees. And keep in mind, we do use equitable and progressive protocols when we institute those fees. If people can't pay, we don't charge them for it, and we don't keep people in custody for not being able to pay. So I just want to give you that update. This is kind of late in the session, right? I'm talking about policy here. I'm still negotiating policy. This isn't about budget asks and ways and means. This bill is still alive and well. What happened is this is in rules. This is one of those special committees that doesn't subject to the deadlines, right? So I will be working on this likely till the end of session, sine die. So I hope there was a bit of a recapitulation for the board. We are trying to sort of cross the T's and dot the I's of our legislative agenda in relation to our priorities. And I'm really proud of the work the team has done because, quite frankly, I didn't think I was going to be sharing this much, even speculative positivity at the beginning of this legislative session. If you remember that 6 months ago, completely different environment than where we are now. So with that, we can go to the next slide. And myself and the team are more than glad to take any questions.
Commissioners, comments, questions? Looks like you got some good jobs there and thank yous. I have one question for you. Now is a good time to remind me, if bills are passed by both houses and go to the governor. There's a magic date by which if she doesn't sign a bill, I can't remember if it's vetoed or what. Can you remind me of that special date and provision?
I don't recall the date off the top of my head. Aaron, do you happen to know the date?
No, I was hoping Paige or you would remember, but if the governor does not sign, it is passed into law. It is not a veto, but I can't remember the time frame either, because it's one that we try not to sit up against very often.
So take it as a homework assignment for between now and when the session is over. I would like to understand what is the time period by which, if the governor is going to veto a bill, she has to take action to use that big red stamp. And then the other is, where is the time period by which if she hasn't signed something, it automatically, it's signature by date. And that'll be great. That's all I'm looking for.
I can answer that for you now if you'd like, Chair Harrington.
Bingo, we have
There we go.
Okay. So during session, the governor has to sign or veto within 5 days. And that does not include Saturdays and Sundays, so 5 business days. But then, and it becomes law, like Aaron said, without signature. So failure to sign or just not signing doesn't become law. But post-session, if it is a bill transmitted to the governor within 5 days of sine die, then she has to act within 30 days of adjournment, and excluding Saturdays and Sundays. So it's what, 6 weeks, or the legislation becomes law without being signed. And there are line item vetoes only for certain budget bills in Oregon, just a fun fact, but otherwise lack of signature implies going into law, chapter signed, same as if it had been signed, which happens a lot for pro forma bills that are just, that don't require a ceremonial signing or something like that. So 30 days.
Terrific. Great. Thank you, team. Good job. Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Yeah, and I know just a little smidgen of this, but I had heard that our juvenile department is going to be cut in fund. And so it seems to be contradictory to, we have $1 billion positive revenue forecast, and yet one of our departments would experience funding cut. So can you connect those dots for me, or am I just not understanding what's going on there?
So, Commissioner, I think, in juvenile, one of our other priorities therein was securing conciliation funding for juvenile to be able to continue those services, right? And it's interesting, even with this influx of both federal money and perhaps an increase in state revenue, I have had a very difficult time trying to push the boulder up the hill in relation to securing that conciliation funding and the law library funding. Legislators didn't really have the appetite for whatever reason to take it up now. I think part of the focus was that community corrections was earmarked to get some semblance of dollars, but folks really wanted to have a larger conversation around kind of also what we're dealing with in a microcosm around reimagine and reshifting those dollars writ large. So I think there was a bit of a notion of, let's not put the horse before the cart, right? Let's try to figure out where we want to head with public safety writ large, and then we can figure out more of those line items. But rest assured, that disconnect of increased funding, yet some of our programs still not being adequately funded, specifically ones that are mandated by the state, is a message I've been sharing with our legislators. Your point is well taken, and I'm actually using that as a bit of an arrow in my quiver to help fuel my policy advocacy asks, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioner questions or comments? Well, thank you, team, for all the good work to date, and keep it up. Get all the way through Sunny Die. Thank you. All righty, we'll move on to our next topic, which coincidentally, Commissioner Willie, is regarding juvenile justice. So we're going to consider the juvenile crime prevention plan and funding for the 2021-2023 biennium. So Clerk Moss, if you could please have Lynn Schroeder, the Director of Washington County's Juvenile Justice, join us, that would be grand.
Yes, Madam Chair, I do not see Lynn on yet, but we do have Cheryl is here to answer any questions. Cheryl, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and we will try and connect with Lynn.
Okay, I wasn't quite prepared for this, but I'm happy to wing it. Yes, Chair Harrington and commissioners and anyone else that's on this particular PowerPoint call. We want to present the Juvenile Crime Prevention Plan for 21 through 23. This is a plan that we have had in existence since the early to late 90s. We have presented a biennium plan for many bienniums. And this is one that will take us forward into the future for 21 through 23. So let me see if I can move the slide. Or Kevin, do you move the slide? Okay, here we go. Okay, there. Okay, the history of the JCP funds. The funds are allocated to each county biennially since 1999, as I had mentioned. This is a flow through from the state through the Youth Development Council. Approximately $770,000 is expected for the 21 through 23 biennium. That amount has been stable for quite a few bienniums. So I'm pleased to say that the allocation has remained the same. Previously funded, supported through the Middle Alternative School Program, which we had a contractor in the community by the name of Youth Contact who handled that particular program for many years. In this case, the RFP process occurred in the summer of 2020, and it's for every 5 years. Okay, next slide. The Juvenile Crime Prevention Advisory Committee role. This subcommittee of the local Public Safety Coordinating Council, which you are aware of, is to advise the Juvenile Department on its major initiatives and activities, and to be an advisory board to the Juvenile Drug Court, which we have in our Juvenile Department. This is to make a biennial recommendation on allocation of juvenile crime prevention funds from the YDC, and to participate in the development and update of an overarching community juvenile crime prevention plan. So it's all involving strategic plan. Next slide.
Hello, Cheryl.
Yes.
Looks like you all started without me. I'm really sorry. I was having trouble with the link.
Do you want to take it over, Lynn?
Sure. I would appreciate that.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you for getting going.
No problem.
Thank you, everyone, for this time today. I really appreciate Chair Harrington and commissioners for this time.
And please know that Cheryl was doing a great job.
I'm sure she was.
Thank you, Chair Harrington.
She was in the hot seat and she did great.
Well, thank you for sharing that information. And just at the beginning of this, I want to say this is the Juvenile Crime Prevention Plan. It just focuses on JCP funding. We have other funds that support a more full plan in the Juvenile Department, but today we're just asking for your support on this. And so here we are about our JCPAC members. Commissioner Willie is one of our members and has been for maybe 3 years, I believe. But on the team, we have a lot of youth serving organizations that we've invited over time. And some of you have been in those meetings. You're all invited to come. It's a great team of folks from cultural organizations, treatment organizations, schools across the county, after-school programs. There's a lot of advocates for juveniles at other many levels. And we have representatives from county behavioral health and public health, and folks from our justice system, the district attorney's office, juvenile judges, law enforcement, public defenders. So there's probably about 40 folks that regularly come to this meeting to advise us. Next slide. The JCPAC has engaged in a planning process over the last couple of years for what youth services, juvenile crime prevention services need to be in the community. And out of that process, gaps in services have been identified, and the committee has set priorities for development of those priorities. And we've had the opportunity to really dive in and start developing a number of them. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the priorities that applied for resource development. School-based programming is really, really important. That really focuses on supporting educational, vocational, and skill building, but also at the same time attending to youth mental health needs and promoting family engagement. What we know in our juvenile justice system that if a family is not involved as an asset and support for a youth, the intervention is less likely to be successful. We also identified law enforcement assisted diversion programs that are community-based as a priority. The good news is our public safety levy in May 2020 passed some additional funds for a diversion program to start up, and there's an RFP that'll be going out for a diversion program here in the next couple of weeks. And we're looking for community-based organizations to lead that. The reason why we're focusing so much on community-based organizations is the data is pretty clear. In juvenile justice, youth recidivism is much more impacted when community organizations are intervening with the youth than if it's the juvenile system. Not to place any blame on folks in our system, they work really well, but as we all know, there's long-term structural issues just with the system that is difficult to overcome. Also prioritize programs that promote wellness, are holistic, have alcohol and drug prevention, mentoring, and family engagement. Our juvenile drug court is an example of that, and we've done a lot of improvements over the last couple of years.
Chair Harrington, Lynn, if I could interrupt, this is really great content, and I think your laptop may be closed, so your sound is a bit muffled. Can you open your laptop? I'm just sure the board wants to hear the full content clearly.
Thank you so much, Tanya.
That's much better. Thank you. We are problem solving virtually.
And you've obviously run into that problem before, so I guess you'll get my profile now as I read this. No, yes, I can move it over here. That will help. Okay. So you're probably reading this slide anyway, and so you know what I'm saying. But our juvenile drug court has gone through a lot of improvements in the last few years to really work on mentoring and family engagement. Safe places for LGBTQ youth and immigrant youth. This is an area where we have a lot more work to do. We do have a contract with IRCO that works with some of our high-risk youth, so that's really supportive. Also increased opportunities to explore, have fun, that are affordable. We all know that youth and families need to have fun together. to be close and to develop resilience to overcome tough times. And of course, increased after-school programs, very, very important. Next slide. The group again decided to focus on middle school aged youth. There's a lot of reasons why this is really, really smart. These youth are identified to engage in more delinquency and have family stressors and at risk for school failure are young. They're still impressionable. They haven't engaged in all of the risk factors that the older youth might engage in. And there's a real good opportunity for us to scoop in and engage them with community supports that can make a difference. What we also know about our system is that African American, Hispanic, and Native American youth are all referred to the juvenile department and admitted to detention at greater rates than their base population in the community. This is something we've paid attention to for many years, and the data goes up and down each year, but there's pretty steady data showing it continues to be overrepresented. We've also had an increase in criminal referrals of middle school aged youth to the juvenile department between 2015 and 2019. And there's a higher proportion of those youth assessed as medium to high risk. So it's really important to intervene with those youth and give them opportunities for success. Next slide. So we did an RFP, and we have a new contractor, Latino Network. They're not new to us. They have a number of contracts with us, which we're very fortunate to have. And they're subcontracting with Portland Opportunities Industrialization Center. POIC runs the Rosemary Anderson High School, and they work with lots of youth of color in Portland, specifically with a lot of African American, but all youth. And we feel very fortunate that they got this contract. Next slide. The program activities under the ROSA program will be to conduct the Juvenile Crime Prevention Risk Assessment on Referred Youth. This is the same risk assessment that we do at the Juvenile Department when youth come to us. It's been validated 4 times. It indicates the risk factors that a youth has, which we can then address, and the resilience factors that they have, which we can address and develop the ones that they don't have. So these youth will be provided case management from a culturally responsive care coordination lens. They'll also be given pro-social programming and referrals to whatever services they might need. The program will also focus on accountability activities to address harm to any victims of crime or the community that may have occurred. And that's really important learning for young people to develop that empathy and that understanding of the impact of their actions. The youth will enter a success plan to address these risk factors and develop resilience. And they'll also have a family success plan that they'll enter with the family, which is about setting goals across 7 domains to support the family to be successful and stable. And both Latino Network and POIC have other internal culturally specific programs that utilize strength-based approaches, and we can refer youth to wraparound services in the mental health field and other cultural and after-school programs in the community. Next slide. The outcome goals we are looking for out of this program, it's a new program, we don't have any outcome goals yet. First, our order is to interrupt and decrease delinquent acts. That's what the Juvenile Crime Prevention Funds ask for. But as we're doing that, and to have that result, what our goal is to increase school attachment and success, increase positive cultural identity, increase connection to positive youth development activities and supportive adults, and also really focus on the family and increase the supports and connections that they need. And as I said earlier, increasing youth empathy and understanding of harm caused. Very, very important to impact recidivism. After 6 months, there's a reassessment with the Juvenile Crime Prevention Assessment. And then we can determine, is there a reduction in risk? Is there increase in resilience? Next slide. So this is just a quick overview. As we're thinking about where we put services in our system, we know that we have to put the right services to address the right youth at the right time. And so on our risk assessment, some youth are identified as low risk. They don't have a lot of risk factors. They did get a referral to our system, but they're good candidates to address those issues in diversion programs, either very light touch by us or a community-based diversion program, and it's very short duration. Youth who are assessed as medium risk have more issues that we want to support them on addressing in order to address their likelihood to reoffend. And so a few of the programs that we've set up internally for those youth are the Step Up Mentoring Program we have here at the Juvenile Department, our effective program in community supervision training that we've given to all of our juvenile counselors. These counselors, and we're just right now doing a training. 3 of our folks are trained to be trainers, and they're in Marion County training some of our staff and some other staff in this program. And we're going to work to do that program to fidelity to have a positive effect on medium and high risk youth. And we really focus on academic attachment and tutoring and connecting kids to school. And of course, whatever treatment is most appropriate based on their needs, mental health, drug and alcohol. So high-risk youth, we have some specific programs that really dive in a little more closely with youth and families. The RIAS's Family Navigators Program, that's both IRCO and Latino Network, work with high-risk youth in our system. The Keys to Success Drug Court Program, and all of the youth in our system are eligible for wraparound services for mental health. So if they have those needs, we can make that connection. And our new ROSA program is part of this too. Next slide. So as I said, this is one portion of our overall plan to address juvenile crime in Washington County. Our request is that you approve this plan today. I'm happy to come back in a future date and share more of some of the other planning that we've put together to address youth. But we ask for your approval today, and that's the end of the slideshow. And I just open up to your questions and comments.
And I just want to reiterate that along with today's presentation, Lynn included a memo to us that had more detail about the different services and objectives than she certainly had time to articulate today, as well as various members of the Juvenile Crime Prevention Advisory Committee. And there, for several different organizations, there are multiple members there, as well as the Public Safety Coordinating Council, and then some annual budget information. So thank you for providing all of that, Lynn.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? Okay, well, I'll close it up with thank you, Lynn, for highlighting this particular plan through the course of the overall juvenile justice department and all of the work that your team does in working with service providers to meet the needs of the youth in our community that are trending in a justice involved sort of way. And these are vital services for helping them get back on track. So the timing is good for this overview and for approving the biennial plan. So is this I just can't, okay, this will be coming to us for approval in the June 22nd board meeting. So commissioners, if you have any questions between now and then, please don't hesitate to give Lynn a holler. She's got a great team and they've always got really good answers to our questions.
Thank you very much, Chair Harrington and commissioners. And thank you, Cheryl, for kicking this off very much.
Yep.
No problem. Happy to do it.
You did a great job. Okay, well, we are running a little bit ahead of schedule here. But I think for our next topics, we probably have time certain set up for them. So we'll just have a longer lunch period then, I guess. Does that make sense, Ms. Angie? Pick back up at 1 p.m.?
Yes, please.
Okay, all righty. So we will pause at this point and reconvene at 1 p.m. And as usual, there is a different Zoom link for the afternoon session that is right on the county website in the usual place.
Thank you, commissioners, and enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you at 1 p.m.
Okie doke. Thank you.